All right, stepsons, you remember the videos we did on car shopping, particularly the one shopping for a car with my daughter Hannah. Well, the new car she has needs some brakes. So her brother, my son Jacob, is going to change the brakes on her car. And we're going to see that in this episode.
Okay, so today we're going to change out the rear brake pads on Hannah's Focus. And so there are a few things that you'll need to do this. Over here you see we've got the actual replacement brake pads. We've got some brake grease. That'll help keep the calipers moving smoothly so that the brake pads wear evenly. We have brake parts cleaner. And then we also have this kit right here, which most auto parts stores, they'll rent this to you. You pay a deposit and then they'll refund you the whole deposit when you return it. We've got a socket set, a tire iron, wheel chock, and some jack stands, as well as a jack over there. Step one, chock the wheels. We're going to chock the front wheels because we are raising the rear wheels. Step two is to jack the car. First, you're going to make sure you find a safe jacking point. You can find this in the owner's manual. You can also just look under the car, see if it's got a frame. You can jack on the frame safely. Okay, so I think I found a safe jacking point. We're just going to raise it slowly to be safe. Okay, so this looks like it's going to work. And so while the tires are still on the ground, you want to make sure that you break the lug nuts loose, because if you take the tires off of the ground before you do that, while you're trying to get that initial break on the lug nuts, the tires are just going to spin. So I've already done that, so we're good to go. Always leave the handle on the jack up when you walk away from it so you don't trip over it when you're walking around. So now what we're doing is we're putting the jack stands under the car at places where they can safely support it. The jack stands, they will hold the car and they don't move like the jack moves, so it's a lot safer to use those to support the vehicle while you're working under it. We're gonna lower it onto the jack stands so that it is safe to work on. And you want to do this part very slowly so you don't damage anything. Okay, and then what I like to do, once the weight of the vehicle is supported on the jack stands, I bring the jack back up to where I lifted it, just so that there are 3 points of contact. This way, it's a little more stable, but if the jack fails, you still have the jack stand supporting it. Okay, so now, what we want to do, because the vehicle is up, we're going to take the tires off so we can access the brakes. And so what I like to do, just as another safety precaution, is slide the tire under the vehicle. That's just one more thing to keep the vehicle from resting on me in the case that it falls. So now that we've got the tire off, the next step is to take both the caliper and the caliper bracket off, because we are getting the rotors resurfaced in this case. They've got some grooves on them, so we need to get that smoothed out. To do that, we need to first take off the caliper, and that's going to be done by removing the caliper guide pins. There are 2 of them in this case. And those are back in here underneath this plastic sheathing. In this case, on a 2012 Ford Focus, it's going to be T45, I believe. And so if I pull this plastic cap off, and then this one down here as well, we'll now have access to those. So it's a Torx bit, that's why the T. I think we bought a set of Star. It was labeled as Star sockets. I think Torx is just trademarked. So Star is the generic for Torx from what we have seen. And so now, I also have to pull, I'm not entirely sure what this part is called, but it's this wire spring type of deal that helps to hold the caliper on in this case. So we got that. And now, I'm also going to undo the cable. The brake line is attached right here. I'm not actually opening up the brake line at all. I'm just removing its mounting point right here, so we have a little more flexibility with where we can stick the caliper while we're working on it. Okay, so now that we've got that cable loosened up a little bit, we're going to come in here and remove the caliper. And you want to be a little careful while you're doing this because the brake system is hydraulic. And there is, I'll show you when I get it off, there's a piston in the brake caliper that moves, and it's what creates the braking force on the pads. It does have a rubber boot on it that you can tear while doing this, and this will become a much more pricey repair if you do tear it. But if you're careful, you're going to be fine. Okay, so we've got the caliper off now. Okay, if you come over here, you can see right here, this is that piston I was talking about. When you step on the brake pedal, that forces fluid into a reservoir in here that then forces this piston to sort of pinch the brake pads together, one on either side of the rotor. And that's what creates the friction that stops the car. But this plastic boot, this rubber boot is what I was talking about. If you damage this, then you'll need to replace it because that will prematurely wear the other components in here. So this is the bracket from the other side. You see it's got this bolt up here and then this bolt down there. These are going to be 13 millimeter bolts, and they are what holds the bracket on. So we got to take those off to get the bracket out. And these are going to be on pretty good. Okay, we swapped out for a larger ratchet, and that gave us the leverage we needed. And that one has been broken loose now, and it's tight quarters, so I'm switching back to the small one because it's more maneuverable. We got one bolt out. Time for the next one. And you can see this next one, it's kind of blocked in by this piece of metal coming off of the hub assembly. So I need an extension. So this is the bracket that we just pulled off of there. And so now that that is out, we can get the rotor off. You want to test it first, because if you don't need to apply extra force to it to get it out, that's ideal. But this one is stuck on there, so I'm just going to... Notice I'm using a mallet, but I'm using the soft side.
What holds the rotor on?
So in this case, the only thing holding the rotor on is corrosion between the wheel hub and the rotor itself. You'll see once we get it off, it's got the same hole pattern as the hub and the wheel. And so it just sits on there, and typically what holds it on is the wheel pressing up against it and the lug nuts, ultimately. So, all right, and I'm not like wailing down on it with the mallet because I don't want to damage it, because we do want to reuse it. This is that special tool we got. It's got various parts, as you can see, and then it's got this plate. What this plate does is it comes and it sits right here on the inside of the caliper so that we can use this screw to, in this case, we need to twist the cylinder as it compresses. A lot of times you can just compress the cylinder in here with a C-clamp, and that's enough. It just goes straight in. In this case, we need to twist it while it goes in. So we've got the wrench here now that we bottomed out, and we are breaking that shank loose just enough so that we can get that tool out of there. Boom! You may have noticed we've got the caliper resting on this jug right here. The reasoning for that is that we don't want to stress out the brake cable that comes to this, because that needs to retain its integrity so that we don't damage it enough that it's going to fail while you're trying to stop the car, because that would be very bad. So we're going to take our rotors into O'Reilly's, into the auto parts store. Not sponsored.
Not sponsored.
And then we're going to also return the specialized tool.
Turn it too far. There's your axle, and I got my discard thickness. I'm going to go ahead and measure it, mic these real fast,
okay,
and make sure we're close enough to be able to turn them.
Sounds good.
So, big man, as you can see, I've got it dialed in, and I've got the diamond edges ready to do a cut on it. And so what I do is I turn on the machine, let it spin a little bit, make sure they're dialed in, make sure it's locked, and start it to do its slow path to take a piece off of that. Okay? Stand back just a little bit.
Okay.
So we've got the rotors back from the auto parts store, and you can see the finish on it is a lot more smooth and uniform than it was when we dropped them off. So now we've got these fixed, we've got the new brake pads. All we have to do is put everything back together. So this is the old brake pad over here, and this is the new one, and you can see they look a little bit different. This one's all worn down, and this one, it's got all the brand new brake material on there. The side profile, you can see this one is much thicker than this brake pad because this one's old and has been worn down. So we're just going to insert this brake pad on the inside of the rotor, and then this one just sits right here on the outside. Then we're going to bring the caliper back over, making sure that the brake line goes back where it was before. And then we're going to bring this down. I'm going to push the guide pins so we can, there we go, fit it right back where it needs to go. And this is where that grease that Stepdad got in my way from getting, there we go. This is where the grease comes into play. So you can see right back here, this right here is part of the guide pin. That is the part that we want to grease, the smooth part, not the threads, but the smooth part. Just so that when the caliper, because the caliper does move slightly while you're braking, we want it to be able to move smoothly and freely and evenly. And so greasing that will help. Okay, and it doesn't take much, and there's probably a better way to apply it than with your finger, but this is what I'm doing. You just put a little bit on there, make sure you get it all the way around. You want to make sure that you're using a synthetic type of grease because petroleum-based grease can eat away at rubber components. And there is a rubber boot here. And again, we talked about the rubber boot inside the caliper earlier. If petroleum-based lubricant gets on that, it's going to eat it away over time. Got the T45 again for these. All right. And then we've got those plastic caps to reinstall around back. And then we've got this 8mm bolt that holds the brake line in place that we don't want to forget about. It's important to start every bolt by hand so you're sure that you're not cross-threading anything. All right, and we've got this bolt just about tight. That one is tightened down. Now we are going to reinstall whatever this is called. So now we've got everything reassembled. But you can see there's still a little bit of play in the caliper, and that's because, if you remember, we compressed that piston, and so it needs to expand back out to take up all that slack in there, or else it's just going to wobble around. So we'll do that after we get the tires back on by pressing on the brake pedal a couple of times. So we've got the tire back on now, and we already did the other side, so now our next step is to lower the car safely. So the first part to lowering a car, you're going to check under and make sure you didn't leave any tools and make sure there's nothing else under there. It's going to get crushed when you lower it. We're good. So now I'm going to jack up the car a little bit. Remember to leave the handle up. And then you can come over here. Pull this jack stand out. Pull the other jack stand out. Okay, so I'm just going to slowly let off. Oh, a little faster than slowly. We're good. Let the car all the way down. Wait until the jack comes down the rest of the way. Bring that out and move it off to the side. And so now that the car is on the ground, what we're gonna do is come in here and we're just gonna mash down on the brake. You notice how it went all the way in? And it went in fairly easily. That's because there's not much resistance on it right now. And the second time that I pressed on it, it didn't even go halfway down, which tells me that the pistons have expanded to take up all the slack in the rear brakes. So we're good there. Now, because we had the tires off, what we're gonna do is tighten the lug nuts. We got the lug nuts back on, but because the tires were in the air, we couldn't torque them down like we needed to. And so whenever you're tightening down lug nuts, it's important to go in a star pattern. You see that one was much looser than the first one. And going in a star pattern just helps it tighten down to the wheel hub more evenly, just so that you're sure it's a good fit. So nothing's gonna shake loose. All right, and that is how you change your brakes.
All right, Stepsons, now you have watched Jacob do a brake change. He did point out one thing to me. The brake cleaner that we showed as a part of some of the materials at the beginning, we didn't need. That would be for new rotors, which would come from the factory with some wax on them. It would be to clean those off. So since we reused the existing ones, had them turned, then we didn't need the brake cleaner. So hopefully now you understand a little bit more about how to change at least rear disc brakes. On this one was a Ford Focus. Process is probably going to be very similar to your specific vehicle, but find a video specific to your vehicle if it's not a Ford Focus. Always remember, I do these videos so that you can learn things, gain confidence, so that you can succeed as you grow into manhood. And that's the first message from every one of these videos I want you to get. You can succeed even though your dad may not be in your daily life. And always remember, your stepdad loves you. I'll see you on the next video.
Okay, so now we're good. Okay, so now we're gonna lower Felix.
Lower the car on the cat.
Okay. So once you make sure your cats are out from under the vehicle, do a spin for dramatic effect. Oh, look at that. Sweet. Okay, you started?
Oh, look at that.
Okay.
Good timing.